Hi, Dan. Thanks a lot for joining. So I'm glad you found the time to catch up and spend a couple of times to talk about the recent announcements. Dan is the Chief Marketing Officer of SAP Business Data Cloud. I'm happy to be talking to you. Dan, BDC since February this year, since the first time it was announced, has been really busy. Every SAP event introduced something new, and this year TechEd was no different. Can you tell us a little bit more about the announcements that you made?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for inviting me here. Love to chat with you and your community as well. We have obviously developers is core to our go-to-market, and there's a lot of great excitements that we're announcing at TechEd, mostly around data. Why? Because as you know, data is becoming the bedrock for a lot of intelligent applications these days. Whether you're building from scratch or building extension to your existing application, it's very difficult to actually empower new applications that are using AI without having rich data sets. So BDC obviously is the core foundation for SAP data strategy, something that we announced obviously in February. And at TechEd, we're announcing a couple of things that are quite unique. One is a new partnership. We announced early on the year an OEM of Databricks within BDC. So it's a core part of the BDC value stack, the same way as ACC or DataSphere or even BW is for BDC. What we announced yesterday is a Solex partnership with Snowflake. That software is called SAP Snowflake. It's a Solex extension, and for those maybe developers that are not familiar with, what Solex is a software piece that is endorsed by SAP and sold by SAP as well. And the reason why we're doing this is because we want to provide flexibility of compute and choice for SAP customers who may want to have maybe projects in both DataSphere, BW, Databricks, as well as maybe Snowflake, and make it easier. The second piece of this is the bidirectional integration of data products between SAP and Snowflake. Again, it's bidirectional with a zero copy kind of protocol, if you will, where you can actually keep the data around in the database, but this is visible around the catalog as well as the data sets that can be discovered between two applications or two databases. Again, this also expands to the partnership we also done with Databricks, Google. So there's now 3 bidirectional integrations that we are doing. So that's announcement number 1. We're also making it very easy for data engineers who are one of the growing kind of engineering community that we have around BDC to have the life cycle of data products managed by a new software called Data Product Studio. And this allows you to combine data products from SAP and non-SAP visually, and then create more I would say high-level definitions of data products, manage the lifecycle, and then expose that into a different set of consumption tools, whether it's agents or on different catalogs, or even your endpoint SQL, if that's what you want. Last but not least, we've done a lot of exciting announcements around HANA, which is the foundational technology around BDC as well. HANA Cloud obviously has a lot of AI announcements around agentic memory, around MCP, and then obviously expansion of this multi-modality compute, not only from relational, but all the way to a graph engine, which is actually much more needed right now for developers when they think about developing new experiences in software. Let me stop here because I talk a lot, but maybe you have other questions that we can dig deeper.
Great, thank you. There's a trend in the SAP world that I've observed over the last couple of years is that SAP is opening itself up to non-SAP technologies, right? Be it through a data exchange, but also even programming languages. And BDC is no different, right? You have Databricks, you have Google, you have Snowflake. How should developers address this? Or maybe before you answer this, what is the trend? Is this trend going to continue in the SAP world? Are you planning more partnerships? Of course, there's probably only so much you can tell us, but what is the general plan for this?
Yeah, I mean, maybe let me take a step back and maybe give you the context why we did this in the first place. Because I think if you're asking me that question, it's because again, whether it's fair or unfair, SAP had maybe perception that we're a closed ecosystem for a long time, right? And I think maybe that's something of a welcome surprise, if you will, in our customer base. But I mean, in my opinion, SAP was always open. But I think data right now is very difficult to actually make sense unless you had a background on SAP. before I joined SAP, I've been doing databases for many years, and I always thought, okay, so database is database, right? What's difficult about this? But you have to understand that SAP is very different because there's a lot of business context data that may not be reflected on a database, right? And what we did for the past 20 years, 30 years as developers is to pull data away from SAP systems, spend a lot of calories and energy recreating all the context that existed on applications to do things like dashboarding or maybe machine learning or things like that. A lot of time and effort went through that extraction of data and reconstruction of data. And I think that cloud made it worse, to be honest. Why? Because most customers that we have today have data everywhere, or not only one cloud, they have APIs, so they have applications, SaaS applications that have APIs, they have multiple clouds, they have data warehouses, they have lakes or lake houses, on-prem, hybrid, cloud, you name it, right? So if you follow the same model of extracting data as a development team and recreating all the context, that problem is too hard to manage for any development team. So we made a conscious decision, and I think SAP was the first one to kind of start this whole revolution around open data ecosystem a couple of years ago, where we made it easy for not to spend so much calorie on reconstructing data. What we wanted to do is open up enrich the data from our applications, but also make sure that customers have access to that across the heterogeneous clouds they have. That's why we started the partnership with not only obviously Databricks, which is a core part of the BDC, now Snowflake and Google that we announced 3 weeks ago, but we also have partnership with likes of Collibra and Confluent as well, and DataRobot, who are also, by the way, non-SAP tools that our customers are increasingly choosing to be able to develop their next generation application. So, our goal is to make this easier for customers, not harder. And we realize this is the new paradigm that we have to go shift. Now, the second thing I will tell you is that the model that we used to know, where for many decades, which is let me put everything into a single location. This has been the paradigm of like data warehousing and maybe lakes and things like that. And you and I know that kind of never worked, to be honest, because most of the data will always be spread across. The architectural pattern that we're developing with our partners as well is something called the Business Data Fabric. And the Data Fabric means that you can keep data where you have. And the most important thing is to bring the definition of things together, not moving data around. That's a very different concept. Exactly, the metadata, the catalog, the definitions, the lineage. So we're making a lot of effort to make sure that BDC is that place that they want to do it, and we believe that SAP as a company that specializes in application, especially around business processes, we have a very different point of view around what is the thing that customers really need to be able to understand what's going across the whole spectrum of the business as well as the depth of the business, right? So we want to bring that concepts together, and we cannot do it alone. We have to do it as an industry, and it's unfair for us to give that hard work of putting things together either to the development team or the customer. So that's why we're doing it as an industry, if it makes sense.
Okay. Great, thank you. And if you were a developer or a technical consultant in the SAP world nowadays, working with transformations, but also working with customers or in-house teams, what would you do? Would you start learning Snowflake, Databricks? Would you start learning new APIs, the BDC integration capabilities? What would be your next steps? What would you recommend developers and consultants do now to stay relevant and stay up to date on the market?
Well, you can assume a couple of things. One, it's no matter what your skills, where your background, I think whatever background you have, whether it's traditional SAP or non-SAP, those skills will be useful in the SAP community now. So that's super important to know. Because you kind of I kind of hinted that we will do more partnerships in the future, and we'll announce it when it's ready. So the skill sets that you already have are not going to go away. In fact, that's going to be needed because you can reuse it within the BDC kind of ecosystem. The other thing that I maybe advise, if you will, I have a teenage son who's thinking about technology, and he's asking me these questions, and to be honest, I don't know the answer, and nobody does, but what he should learn and all of that. But I say stay curious, and I think it's easier if you start from it rather than bottoms up. Instead of saying what language I have to go learn, work it from the other way around, which is how do I see the world changing? We will know in the next 5-10 years that there will be agents for sure. That's not gonna go away, right? We know it's gonna be highly connected. Internet is not gonna get slower, if you will. So there are things that will happen in the future that necessitate you think to work backwards from the reality that we're gonna live in. And in that world where you see either human beings or artificial beings connecting and talking to each other, one of the most important skills is to understand how things are coming together. And this is why I think the idea of the business data fabric is so important, because I would say if I would have asked CIOs or maybe chief data architects 5 years ago, none of them actually were implementing either a data mesh or data fabric. But right now, we in our surveys, we see about less than half of them in a couple of years to be adopting this. So as a kind of consultant or developer, know that that's the world that we're going to go in. So spend some time thinking about what is the data fabric impact both in the IT as well as in business, because there are concepts around like lifecycle of managing data products. There are concepts around knowledge graphs. There are concepts around catalogs that will impact no matter what you do. Then you can learn the skill set that that powers the underneath technology. If you choose to, by the way, leverage your SQL skill set or your NoSQL skill set, or maybe just purely just agentic plus development skill set, that will all be useful. But I would say think about from the bigger picture and then choose the right skill set depending on the job that you want.
Okay. Great, thank you. So when I was listening to you, I thought if I had a teenage son, I have a very small son. He doesn't speak yet, but if I had a teenage son, what would I tell him if he wanted to go the path of becoming a developer? What you said was actually really important. Be curious, right? Don't just stick to your code and forget about everything else, but start getting interested in why we're doing this, how this works, why the company would benefit from building such and such extension or such and such report, etc. So a very good tip here. Stay curious. You talk a lot about data. I think everything to do with Business Data Cloud is data, right? But what made this entire, let's say, concept possible is, of course, the underlying database, HANA. Yesterday at the keynote, I heard a very interesting statement that HANA is the AI database. What about the developers that currently limit their, let's say, daily tasks to writing SQL, querying the database, maybe creating some views, etc.? What should developers do to also embrace this HANA evolution that we're currently seeing?
Yeah. That's a very good question, and I will maybe just frame that when we think about BDC and HANA Cloud, we don't see it as two different things. For us, it's the same data fabric component with different compute. So the skill set that they were now spending on HANA Cloud will continue to be super important, more than ever. But maybe just context around why the AI database, right? So if you recall the past few years, there's one term that we've been saying a lot, but we don't say anymore, which is big data, right? That kind of went away, right?
Right.
Why do you think that is? Because before we thought like crunching and processing more data was analogous to adding more value, and that's not true anymore. I think you and I know that that's not by default so much true. And if you think about the work that we used to do with SQL, creating views, was a lot of that was to power maybe dashboards, for example, or power maybe some type of like machine learning model with the end point in mind or end goal in mind. Now it turns out that that model is also very limited, because if you stay backwards, you think, why am I developing something that I kind of know what the answer is for? What is more interesting is developing something where there's a lot of open questions, there's a lot of open-ended variables, and let the machine figure out what is the best solution for us, which is what I think things like language models and agents can really provide us, right? Go beyond our understanding and give us something that we don't know. So in that model, by the way, it turns out that the better database to be able to provide it is not a single database that crunches a lot of big data anymore. And for those models, for many decades, we had share nothing architecture, if you think about it, right? So where you had databases that spin up a lot of small clusters and divide and conquer the processing a lot of data, maybe through a lake or maybe some scale out solution. Because that's not really important these days. What is important is to share everything, every context together. And HANA Cloud, obviously today has a single engine with different modalities. It has, graph, document, relational, and now knowledge graph as well. So when you have a database that shares everything, every single context, and can provide metadata on top of that is about the entirety of your business, it is now becoming the most important asset for feeding into a agent or language model or things like that, right? So I think that's why we feel like it's now so critical for developers to think that way, that we're not just feeding rows and columns, but we got to feed the entire thing as well. And HANA Cloud is probably one of the best solutions out there for that. So that's number one. Number two would be some of the announcements that we've done around HANA Cloud, which is we now support MCP on top of HANA Cloud. We can provide, therefore, an agentic memory on top of that, so that you can actually have agents really understanding deeply what's happening across all of that I guess business context around the company through HANA Cloud, as well as providing that as a long-term memory for our users. So that's maybe a recap of what I think is so important, the skill set that I think developers should have now.
Great, but above all, the statement that you made still applies. Stay curious, right? That's the most important thing. So start getting familiar with what's there. You don't have to be an expert in everything, but at least know what's available, what options there are, what the different new terms mean, right? Because a lot of new terms also appeared over the course of the last few months, etc. Super, Dan. Thank you very much. I think it was great talking to you. I know you have a very busy schedule over these 2 days, a lot of announcements, a lot of discussions, etc. So I'm happy we had the chance to catch up. And for the developers, I'm going to repeat it again, and for consultants, stay curious. Don't become experts in everything, but make sure you at least know and spend a little bit of time understanding what the new innovations are. Thank you very much, Dan.
Thank you.
Pleasure talking to you. Cheers.
Cheers.